This is the video for your autobiographical still life. A still life is a drawing or a painting of inanimate objects. So these are objects that are not alive, they don't move, they just stay still, hence the name still life. Autobiographical means about your own experiences or life history, like an autobiography book. So for this project, you're going to have to pick out your autobiographical items. You're going to gather 5 to 7 small objects to be used in this project. These objects should reflect you and what makes you unique. They should be of limited depth and size because you're going to be taping and pinning them to a board. So something like a baseball is not going to work because it's just going to roll off. The items you choose can be symbolic or literal. The objects have to be appropriate for school and not of large financial value because they will be staying at school for the duration of the project. And then the last thing is you will be drawing the objects you bring in, so make sure it's something that you are confident that you can draw. So if you are not awesome at drawing portraits yet, maybe don't bring in a photograph of people. And then below you can look through the list of suggestions. You can pause the video and just kind of take a look through those. This is my example. This is my setup. So I've taped things down. I've pinned things to the board. I have a watch because I was a cross-country runner in high school. I have euros on there because I've traveled to several places. I have swing dancing bracelets because I really like to go swing dancing downtown. I have a catnip tea bag toy because my cat's name is Earl Grey, like the tea, and that's his toy. And I have an air plant because I love plants. So all those things are attached to my autobiographical still life. Proportion is going to be something that we focus heavily on in this project because we really want to make sure the size of everything is accurate. So proportion is comparing the size of one thing to another for accuracy. To do this, choose a reference object, usually the most average sized object in your composition. So in the picture on the right, it would probably be the pear, rather than the leaf, which is pretty small, or rather than the bottle, which is the biggest thing. So the pear is pretty average. Now you're looking at the pear and you want to compare it to the size of the bottle to figure out how large you would draw the bottle if you've already drawn the pear. Now you would think, is the pear half the size of the bottle? Is it a third of the size of the bottle? So you want to measure that one object, and then you want to see how many of those objects can fit side by side in the other object. So for example, if I double the height of that pear, so it's 2 pears high, and then I shift that measurement so it's actually in line with the bottom of that bottle, you'll see that 2 pear heights is actually the height of that one bottle. And if I go ahead and put those pears in, you'll be able to see that I've just shifted those pears up, and I'm using proportion to compare the size of the pear to the bottle. Now, the next thing you'll also have to consider when you're doing your still life is overlapping. Overlapping shows depth in space. So it shows if something is farther or closer to you. Things that are closer to you will overlap or cover objects that are further away or behind it. Objects that are closer to you will also be lower on your page. So right here, you should be able to see that this object, since it's lower on this page, that it is closer to you than this object, which is higher on the page. We'll also want to consider composition. Composition is how you position objects in your artwork. So similar to when we talked about composition with your sketchbooks and how you move those different symbols around on your sketchbook, this is going to be a composition of your still life items. So figuring out where those items go on that board. You really should be thinking about balance when you're considering composition. There are 3 types of balance: symmetrical, asymmetrical, and radial. You'll see that I put a small image next to each type of balance that kind of describes the way each type of balance works. So symmetrical is when if you split something down the middle, it's exactly the same on both sides. Asymmetrical is how it feels balanced, but things are not identical on each side. And radial balance is when things extend out from the center or they radiate out from the center. So you can see that my design is asymmetrical. It feels balanced. There's no big empty whites, blank spaces. There's not a bunch of things crammed into one corner, so it feels pretty balanced, but things are not identical on both halves if you split it in half. So mine is asymmetrical. When you're making your composition, you want to try out a couple different layouts. You don't want to just pick the very first one you think of because it's probably not going to be the best one. So just take some time to arrange those objects around. And this is what you'll be doing not today, but your next work day. But you want to take some time to arrange some objects, keep moving it around. Feel free to take pictures as you go in case one ended up being really good earlier on in your process, but you didn't realize how good it was at the time. So this is my process of rearranging all my objects, and then eventually that last one on the bottom right is what I went with, the one I have circled. So my tips for you for drawing a still life is looking at the objects with new eyes. This means imagine that you've never seen that object before and draw just what you see. Don't just assume, oh, I know what a pear looks like, and draw what you know a pear is shaped like. Rather, look at the actual pear that you're seeing and draw the way that you see it. Because sometimes the angle of different objects really affects how it looks. Then I want you to lightly sketch the general shape and size of the main things. Don't worry too much about details. Don't worry too much about the perfect edge and line of every object right when you're laying things out at the beginning. You should pay attention to proportion and overlapping. This is going to help make the size of everything look right and the depth of everything look correct. And lastly, test out several compositions. Make sure you have good balance. Don't just go with the first thing that you throw onto the board. In this project, we're also going to start shading it eventually, so I will have a separate video that describes how to shade and different values. But value is the lightness or darkness of something. And in this project, I'm going to expect you to have a wide range of values. So that's everything from the really light values here on the left of the value scale and all these really dark values on the right of the value scale. We want to have a full range, not just only lights, not just only darks, but light, dark, and everything in between. This is also going to help with our depth and to help things look like they're really 3D. Our goal with this project is kind of to make a trompe l'oeil. A trompe l'oeil is a trick of the eye. All three of these images are actually paintings. So on this old building, that's a painting that was painted to make it look like it had a big hole in it, but there's actually no hole in it. Nothing's broken on that wall. And then on the right, there are those two shadow boxes or window boxes, and they look really realistic because of all that shading that's done and making sure the proportions are correct. So our goal with this project is kind of to make a trompe l'oeil or trick of the eye. We're going to trick our viewer into thinking that our drawing is the real deal.